The Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire, Part 1. The Road to Revolt, 1908 to 1916. The final century of the Ottoman Empire resembled the last breaths of a great body struggling to keep its soul alive. The empire's heart beat in Istanbul, but its veins reached deep into Arabia, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, and Yemen. Yet the pulse at those distant ends had grown weak. When the Second Constitutional Revolution of 1908 was proclaimed, it sparked renewed hope across the empire. Freedom, equality, brotherhood, the slogan of the Young Turks, echoed in mosques, schools, and coffeehouses. But in the Arab provinces, these promises soon turned hollow. The Committee of Union in Progress, now in power, believed the only way to save the empire from collapse was through strict centralization and strong state control. However, this policy alienated the Arab population. Arab intellectuals sought education in their own language, wanted representation in local administration, and demanded a degree of autonomy. In Beirut, Damascus, and Baghdad, new newspapers emerged, writing not of Ottoman identity, but of Arab consciousness. A slow but powerful cultural awakening had begun. In 1913, the First Arab Congress convened in Paris. Representatives from various Arab provinces openly called for autonomy within the Ottoman system. Around the same time, a secret society known as Al-Fatah, the Young Arab Society, was founded in Damascus, spreading Arab nationalist ideas among young officers and bureaucrats. This group would later supply many of the key figures of the revolt. The Ottoman government closely monitored these movements, seeing them as seeds of sedition. To counter them, the CUP increased the number of Turkish officials in Arab provinces, reassigned Arab officers to distant fronts, and tightened control over local affairs. Outwardly, peace was maintained, but beneath the surface, resentment simmered. Then came the catastrophe. When World War I erupted in 1914, the Ottoman Empire entered the conflict on the side of Germany. The decision shocked many in the Arab provinces, for it meant their lands would soon become battlefields. Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the Hejaz were now not only Ottoman territory, but also targets of British and French ambitions. From their base in Egypt, the British reached out to Arab tribes with secret offers. If the Ottomans fall, you shall rule yourselves. This message found a particularly receptive audience in Sharif Hussein bin Ali, the Emir of Mecca. Outwardly loyal to Istanbul, he bore growing distrust toward the Young Turks, whose centralist policies he viewed as Turkish domination rather than Islamic unity. In 1915, Hussein began a historic correspondence with Britain's High Commissioner in Egypt, Sir Henry McMahon. In what would later be known as the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, the British promised support for an independent Arab kingdom if the Arabs revolted against Ottoman rule. To Hussein, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. A chance to unite the tribes under his leadership and secure the Hejaz for his family. Meanwhile, Ottoman fortunes were deteriorating. The failed Suez Canal campaign of 1915 had drained men and morale. Arab soldiers serving under Ottoman banners were dying in foreign deserts, and many began to question why they should fight for a government that seemed increasingly distant and Turkish. British gold began to flow discreetly from Cairo into the Arabian Peninsula. By early 1916, Hussein's mind was made up. His son Faisal met secretly with British agents in the desert, rallying tribal leaders to the cause. In Medina, the Ottoman commander Faridin Pasha sensed what was coming. Addressing his troops, he declared, "The Hejaz is the heart of the caliphate. If it falls, the unity of Islam falls with it." On a sweltering June morning, the silence of Mecca was broken by the thunder of guns. The Arab Revolt had begun. Sharif Hussein's forces opened fire on Ottoman garrisons. On June 10, 1916, he formally proclaimed the Arab Revolt and raised a new flag: red, white, green, and black, the colors that would later define modern Arab nationalism. From mosque minarets alongside the call to prayer came the cry of independence. The fighting was fierce. Mecca fell quickly, but Medina held firm under Faridin Pasha's leadership. His defense would become legendary. The final Ottoman stand in the Arabian Peninsula. At first, the Arab forces were little more than scattered tribal bands, poorly armed and loosely organized. Then came the British. From Cairo, they sent rifles, ammunition, and gold to sustain the rebellion. Along with them arrived a young English archaeologist who would become a myth. Thomas Edward Lawrence. Known later as Lawrence of Arabia, he understood both the geography of the desert and the psychology of the tribes. Under his guidance, the revolt adopted guerrilla tactics, striking not at cities, but at the lifelines of the empire. Throughout late 1916, Arab raiders repeatedly sabotaged the Hejaz Railway, the crucial supply route linking Medina with Damascus. Rails were torn up, bridges blown apart, trains ambushed. Each explosion reverberated across the sands, weakening the Ottoman grip on Arabia. By the end of that year, what had begun as a local rebellion had turned into a global front in the Great War. The British Navy dominated the Red Sea, French envoys reached out to Arab leaders in Syria, and Ottoman authority in the southern provinces began to crumble. Yet historians agree the revolt was not merely the product of British manipulation. It sprang also from deeper social and ideological roots, decades of centralization, economic neglect, and the rise of Arab identity in the modern age. The revolt was where these forces converged. For the Ottomans, it was not only a political blow, but a spiritual one. The Caliphate, once a symbol of Islamic unity, now faced rebellion in the land of the holy cities themselves. In late 1916, news from the Hejaz stunned Istanbul. Mecca had fallen, the tribes had turned, and Ottoman banners were being torn down. After 4 centuries of Ottoman rule, a new era was dawning in the Arab lands, one born of both awakening and betrayal. None yet realized that this revolt would not simply mark a people's struggle for freedom, but redraw the entire map of the Middle East. The Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire, Part 2, The Outbreak and Consequences, 1916 to 1918. After that first thunderous cannon shot over Mecca in the summer of 1916, the deserts of Arabia would never be the same. The revolt, led by Sharif Hussein, was not merely a military uprising against Ottoman garrisons. It was a challenge to 4 centuries of Ottoman presence and prestige in the Arab world. Mecca soon fell into rebel hands, yet the city of Medina, defended by the indomitable Faridin Pasha, became the last fortress of Ottoman honor. Known later as the Lion of the Desert or the Tiger of Medina, Faridin refused to surrender, guarding the Prophet's city through starvation, disease, and siege. The first phase of the revolt was chaotic. The Arab tribes did not trust each other completely, and the Ottoman command underestimated the scale of the insurrection. But the situation changed when a British officer named T.E. Lawrence arrived at Faisal's camp. Lawrence, already familiar with the desert and its tribes, transformed the scattered rebellion into an organized guerrilla war. His strategy was simple yet devastating. Don't fight the Ottoman army head-on, destroy its lifelines. That lifeline was the Hejaz Railway, which carried men, food, and ammunition from Damascus to Medina. Throughout 1917, the railway became a target of relentless sabotage. Arab fighters tore up the tracks, blew up bridges, and ambushed supply trains. The desert thundered with explosions. Plumes of black smoke rose into the shimmering heat. Ottoman soldiers, unfamiliar with this new kind of invisible warfare, found themselves chasing ghosts across the sands. The empire was bleeding from within. From Cairo, the British financed the campaign and shaped its image. To the world press, they portrayed the uprising as a noble Arab struggle for freedom. In reality, it was a calculated effort to cripple the Ottoman Empire's southern flank and protect Britain's strategic interests, the Suez Canal and the oil fields of Mesopotamia. The Arab warriors fighting under Hussein and Faisal had no knowledge of this duplicity. They believed they were fighting for the birth of a free Arab nation. The first major victory came in July 1917 with the fall of Aqaba. Against all odds, Faisal's forces crossed the uninhabitable deserts of Wadi Rum and captured the port city from the Ottomans. Aqaba's capture gave the revolt a direct link to British supply lines from Egypt, a turning point in the war. For the first time, Arab and British forces stood shoulder to shoulder, their banners fluttering together in the coastal wind. Later that year came an even greater shock. Jerusalem fell to the British Army under General Edmund Allenby. When news reached Istanbul, newspapers were printed in black borders, prayers were offered in mosques for the fallen holy city. The loss of Jerusalem was not only a military defeat, it was a spiritual wound that pierced the empire's very soul. By 1918, the revolt had become a desert storm sweeping northward. The Arab army marched toward Syria, with British aircraft flying overhead and Lawrence riding among the tribes. Ottoman supply lines collapsed, entire units surrendered or retreated. Yet while Arab fighters dreamed of uniting the lands from the Red Sea to Damascus under a single flag, secret agreements in Europe were already sealing their fate. In 1916, the same year the revolt began, Britain and France had secretly signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, dividing the Middle East into spheres of influence. According to this plan, the very lands the Arabs were fighting to liberate would be parceled between London and Paris. None of the Arab leaders, not even Sharif Hussein, knew of it. In September 1918, the Ottoman defense finally broke apart. At the Battle of Megiddo, British and Arab forces crushed the Ottoman army. Arab cavalry swept through Dera and advanced toward Damascus. Ottoman banners were hauled down, Arab flags rose over the city. On October 1, 1918, Damascus, the jewel of the Arab provinces, fell. The long Ottoman night in the Arab lands was over. For Sharif Hussein and his sons, it seemed to be the dawn of a new Arab kingdom. But history had prepared another ending. After the war, Britain and France ignored the promises made in the McMahon letters. The dream of a united Arab nation vanished under the weight of colonial ambition. The League of Nations mandates carved the region into new political entities. Syria and Lebanon went to France, Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine to Britain. The Arabs, having fought to end Ottoman rule, found themselves under new masters. In 1919, Faisal established a short-lived Arab government in Damascus. For a moment, it seemed the promises might come true. But the French army invaded in 1920, crushing the nascent Arab state. Faisal was exiled, only to be placed later on the throne of British-controlled Iraq. His brother Abdullah became ruler of Transjordan. The borders of the modern Middle East were thus drawn not by the tribes who had fought in the desert, but by European pens in distant rooms. For the Ottomans, or what remained of them, the revolt left a scar that time could not heal. In Istanbul, newspapers called it a betrayal of the caliph. Religious scholars declared the uprising unlawful. Yet many historians would later argue that the seeds of revolt had been sown by the empire's own hand. Through years of centralization, economic neglect, and cultural alienation. The Young Turks' growing emphasis on Turkish identity had alienated the Arabic-speaking provinces, eroding the moral authority of the caliphate itself. The Arab Revolt not only hastened the collapse of an empire, but gave birth to the modern Middle East. In the 1920s and 1930s, Arab nationalism evolved from a wartime movement into a powerful ideology. Across the region, new leaders invoked the memory of the revolt as a symbol of unity and pride, even as the borders drawn by foreign powers kept the Arab world divided. Yet the question of betrayal never faded. In Turkish memory, the revolt became synonymous with treachery, the moment brothers turned their backs on the caliph. In Arab memory, it was remembered as a noble struggle for self-determination, betrayed by European deceit. The truth lies somewhere between. It was both a rebellion born of hope and a manipulation born of empire. In Medina, Fahreddin Pasha held out longer than anyone. Even after the armistice, starving and surrounded, he refused to surrender the Prophet's city. When he was finally captured in early 1919, he stood unbroken, the last Ottoman soldier of the Arab lands. His defiance closed a chapter of history written in both honor and loss. When the desert finally fell silent, history itself seemed to exhale. The Arab Revolt had ended, but its echoes shaped every border, every state, every conflict that followed. The cannon fired over Mecca in 1916 did more than announce a rebellion. It heralded the death of an empire and the birth of a new, uncertain world. Thus, under the burning sun of Arabia, the Ottoman and Arab destinies parted ways. One empire fading into memory, one nation still searching for the freedom it had been promised.